Man, I think at this rate we need to start using that Goes West satellite on the opening clip. Yet another Pacific system coming inland, and not really a whole lot of weather elsewhere around the country. So let's go back to 9 p.m. Central last night. A large wave coming into Northern California, the Bay Area located right there, Sacramento, and Los Angeles. And within this overcast, it's got a cellular appearance, indicating the presence of convective activity. So there's instability in the air, and that's helping to augment some of this precip that we're seeing. On the backside, dry slot coming in, and the cold front running about like that, warm front probably about like that, and the occlusion trailing on off towards the northwest. So we run that through the overnight hours. It spreads to the east into the Sierra Nevadas and into Nevada itself. And you can see another wave developing right there, that telltale S shape. So a lot of activity on the tail end of these systems as they come into California one after the other. And this is about where we're at right now. It looks like even a smaller wave right there trying to come together. That's just going to be west of Santa Barbara. Offshore, this is going to be back in the cold air, but that looks pretty potent. A well-developed comet cloud, and these convective updrafts are producing lightning and thunder. So a lot of energy in this air this afternoon. So I wanted to show you yesterday's model run. I feel it's important to show not only where the models excel, but where they fail. Now we're looking at the wind field, the sustained winds and these black marks right there. The gusts indicated by the red ice attacks with the numbers as shown here. Those are going to be in knots. And we also see the forecast reflectivity, indicating basically where the stronger cells are. So going forward into the evening, about 9 or 10 p.m., and off into midnight, you can see that it tries to build the 60-knot gust off of the Bay Area. You can see 35 gusting to 60. And then early this morning, this is going to be about maybe 2 in the morning, all that moves inland. You can see the model here, the NAM, forecasting gusts up around 50 knots, which is near 55 to 60 miles an hour, with sustained winds of 25 around Sacramento. So did we get that? Well, if we take a look at reality here, this is about when that system is coming onshore. We do see the winds picking up. You can see Sacramento there with 15 sustained, and sustained 20 knots at San Jose with gusts up to about 30. And about the strongest winds that we got was about maybe 3 or 4 in the morning. That's going to be right around here. And I can see Sacramento had some gusts up near 30, and briefly they were up to about 40. That was about when it was the strongest, but I did not see any gusts in here higher than 40. So that's going to be the plot right there, gusting to 37. So I think maybe the models are kind of overdoing the winds a little bit. Maybe the boundary layer processes are not really being handled that well. So that's just something we're going to have to keep an eye on as we use these models during these successions of incoming systems. Now, I should caution you that does not mean to ignore the Weather Service warnings for wind. Very likely they're looking at this and taking this into account. That's more of a issue for our advanced viewers who are kind of following the model data, and that could be something to keep an eye on. Anyway, this is what we're looking at this afternoon. High pressure across the eastern half of the country, a series of weak fronts pushing through the plains. Temperatures as high as 76 at Abilene this afternoon, 76 at Junction, and it drops off down to the 40s in Nebraska and the 30s in North Dakota, so pretty mild across much of the country. And of course, out west, that's where we get into trouble. There's our system moving inland, and what you'll notice here, it's not a very typical landfall for a frontal system. Usually what we see is high pressure building back in behind it, lower pressure in the Great Basin area, and that produces a gradient that drives the front on in. Well, today it's a little bit reversed. We've got low pressure along the coast and high pressure in the Rockies. So that front is probably not going to push very fast to the east at the surface, although the upper level dynamics will tend to carry a lot of the energy off into the plains. However, we're obviously not going to see very many effects from that. This is that front right there, and there's the tail end. And of course, that's what we're going to have to watch this afternoon and this evening. Very likely we've got that wave developing off the edge of the screen. And we'll take a look at the model data shortly and see what that's going to do. Up in the Pacific Northwest, occlusion offshore, you can see the thickness gradients are very weak. We're talking about these lines right here, not showing very much going on, so this is kind of a dumping ground for all of that maritime polar air. It kind of gets wrapped up offshore and basically modifies over that cold current. And up to the north in Alaska, continued cold in the inland regions, a little push of cold air from the Arctic region basin, and looking out there in eastern Canada, some very cold air in place, especially in this region, unusually cold, and some of those sub-zero temperatures coming down all the way to Quebec, and we're going to see that get worse as we go into next week. And then heading to the south, this is a new frontal system coming into the Great Lakes region, a mild push of cooler air coming back in behind that, and ahead of it, mild southwesterly flow coming in from the Midwest. And I think this is a good vantage point. This starts out at midday today, looking at the sea level pressure and the 1,000 through 700 millibar thickness, so basically the lowest 3 kilometers. So the cold front located about like that. The warm front, those are always hard to find, but kind of maybe a setup, something like that. Can't really figure that out through Nevada. And then the occluded front goes further up to the north, and there's an other occlusion up there off of Washington. So the triple point located in the Sierra Nevadas, where we've got that heavy snow and heavy precip, and the warm sector down to the south. You can see that we've got 1 inch precipitable water up to maybe 1.5 inches out around the west coast region, and higher amounts offshore, about 500 miles west-southwest of Los Angeles. So let's go into tonight and see how that all unfolds. Basically takes a track into Los Angeles and loses definition, partly due to those pressure falls out to the west. So we can't really see the frontal system very much down here, but we do see the comet cloud appearance right there with the higher precipitable water and the warm front out to the east there. So I think we're seeing maybe a wave developing, maybe something like that. Kind of hard to tell, but here comes another one back to the west. This is back within the cold air. Looks very potent there. And I'm going to call that frontogenesis with a new system out there and an occlusion up to the north. So that's going to be heading for the central California coast. We're looking at about midnight. So obviously this is going to have less moisture, but there will still be impacts with that. There it comes inland, about 12Z, which is about 4 in the morning, all through the central California region. That will affect that area, and then it will clear on off for the day tomorrow. Maybe a few residual showers, but you can see out to the west, here we go again. So I'll go ahead and show you where we're at the time we record this. This is the current satellite imagery. This is the infrared channel here. That's showing the colder cloud tops in green and yellow. We've also got the sea level pressure in black and the 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness in dashed orange. And I know some of you viewers probably hate orange. I saw a few comments about that, but we're going to have to continue using that if necessary, such as in this image. So what do we have here? Well, let's look at the thickness. You can see a frontal zone right there. That's the frontal transition zone driving this system. And that puts the cold front out here, probably right there in that trough. So this is about exactly where that front is. And it leads on up into the Sierra Nevadas. And then, of course, we lose definition as it gets further north. But I think I can see it right there. That's one warm front, and then I think another wave here, another wave back towards Naval Fallon Air Station. And yeah, that looks pretty good right there. So everything south of that is the warm sector. So what we have here is some improving conditions around San Francisco and Sacramento. Most of the problems are in the central California valleys, the coastal ranges, and, of course, Los Angeles. They're going to see a deterioration of the weather going into tonight. So the station plots, well, that's going to make a mess. So let's zoom on in, see if we can add those. And there you go. There's some of the station plots. If you're watching on a phone, this is probably a little hard to read. But this is showing us temperatures back there in the San Joaquin Valley in the 50s with south to southwest winds. And out there in Nevada, temperatures in the 30s and 40s. And then down there in the southwestern deserts, south of Las Vegas, temperatures in the 60s. And that, of course, is going to be part of the warm sector. And off to the west. That is what we're watching for tonight. The tail end right there with the moisture supply heading right into Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. And there's actually a lot to look at on the high-resolution rapid refresh model. This is going to be the winds and pressure and the reflectivity. So this corresponds pretty well to what we see this afternoon with all those showers in the inland valleys. And then going into the evening about 5 or 6 p.m., you can see this line of convection developing around the Channel Islands into Oxnard and Los Angeles. That could have some thunderstorms in it. For the most part, most of it's going to be showers, but moving quickly inland. And that moves into the southwestern deserts and starts weakening a little bit as it gets into that drier boundary layer air. We're up to about 10 p.m. You can see some more residual showers and storms out there around Bakersfield, but out to the west. There's the next big change. That's going to come towards early morning. The model going for possible thunderstorms. Yeah, 40 to 50 dBZs. That would be in the thunderstorm range. Could very well be showers. So it looks like another round of inclement weather coming inland and affecting much of Northern California for tomorrow. Yes, other parts of the U.S. do exist, and we will cover those now. California, we haven't paid too much attention to them because they've been under a ridge for months and months. So I promise we will come back to the rest of the U.S. when we get some significant weather in this part of the country, possibly around midweek, and I'll show you why. So going forward into tomorrow, we see that return flow coming up from the Gulf, 1-inch precipitable water lurking down to the south. And we're going to get a couple days of pressure falls in the Great Plains, helping to prime the atmosphere in the Gulf Coast region. And it looks like finally by Wednesday night going into Thursday, a strong front coming together in the Interstate 35 corridor towards the Ozarks. So there we go. That's going to be the setup. You can see 1-inch precipitable water out ahead of that in Arkansas. That's going to be Wednesday night, so possibly some severe weather Wednesday night going into Thursday. So that'll move on off to the east. Cold front down to the south. Warm front up towards the northeastern U.S. and cold, dry advection in the wake of that. Pivotal Weather does have some good products here for looking at model-derived severe weather parameters. I think a good one for this event would be Most Unstable Cape. It's kind of a worst-case scenario. And let's see what it looks like. That's going to be 0Z Wednesday evening, so 6 p.m. And that's not really very much instability. That's about 1,000 through 1,200. So instability is going to be limited, but very likely we do have the shear. Let me give you the Shreveport photograph, and it is definitely stretched out and a little bit of curvature there from 0 through 1 kilometer. So we're not out of the woods for tornado potential. Could see some supercells. The instability not that great, but during the cold season we don't really need a whole lot of that to get rotating storms going. And you can see aloft, winds are up near 90 knots. So the bulk shears are in place. We do have SRH. We have limited instability, a little bit of a cap, and we do have forcing. So we'll take a look at this on Wednesday and break it down, and maybe that'll give us a little bit of a change from the focus on California. Returning to the map for the rest of the week, And looks like the plateau high setting up once again out there around Salt Lake City, and pressure falls remaining pretty far offshore out there, and that'll probably direct some of the atmospheric rivers up there towards Washington and Oregon rather than inland into California. So the system up here in the northeastern U.S., that remains pretty far inland. Not much of a coastal low, just a warm front moving up the coast. And then by Friday, things improve. We do get a coastal low along the tail end right there, redevelopment, but that remains pretty far offshore. And we got kind of a nice weekend across much of the country. Still stormy out there in California. Looks like another atmospheric river all the way from San Francisco down to Los Angeles and San Diego for the weekend. And starting out the new work week, return flow once again for Texas. Very similar overall across much of the country to what we have right now. So just kind of an active Pacific-dominated pattern over the next 1 to 2 weeks. You may have noticed I've refrained from showing you the temperature extremes because there's not been much to look at. With the weather pretty much going west to east, that doesn't really favor much in the way of temperature exchanges, so today, no temperature records. We do get some warm readings for tomorrow. Abilene expected to break their record for the date at 80 degrees, and DFW coming up to 79. Another warm day for Wednesday at Dallas with 80 degrees, and that's mostly due to downslope flow. That's not really air coming from the tropics. This is the involvement of adiabatic warming as we get that descent of air from the plateau regions of Mexico. Some moderation for Thursday as that cold front moves into the eastern U.S. and brings cold air back behind it. One little record high, well, a near record in Idaho for Friday, 41 degrees. But Saturday looking nondescript. And there's Sunday, so just more of the same. Now, one area where we will have some weather going on is well up north in the Arctic. I know this is probably hard to read, but we've got Northwest Territories right there, Nunavut, and the Arctic Islands right there, and there's Greenland. So what's going to happen, we're going to watch this area right here going into midweek. Right around Banks Island, you can see this low coming together, a cold high across the Arctic ice pack around the Beaufort Sea, and we get this frontal system coming together. There it is, developing around Cambridge Bay. Cold front down to the south, warm front up to the north, and this is going to slingshot some of these very cold readings from the glacier ice pack regions of Elamir Island and Greenland and bring that on into much of eastern Canada. And there it is. You can see these are going to be temperatures around minus 20 to minus 30 with strong wind chills circulating back into the Hudson Bay region for Thursday and into Friday. And that will produce some temperatures down near minus 40 in northern Quebec. So they're going to get a bit of a cold snap. Of course, they're usually cold, but this is going to be an even more severe type of cold snap than they're accustomed to. You can see minus 30s and minus 40s all the way up from, I guess it's going to be around Coral Harbor, up to Devon Island and Elamir Island. You don't really get many updates like this on the internet. I don't know where you would find an Arctic forecast, but there you go. We try to cover all areas within reason. And that completes your whirlwind tour of the weather. You may have noticed that we don't have commercials on this channel. It is not monetized. If you want to keep it that way, we do need your Patreon support, so please consider that. Here's the link to our Patreon website. And if you could kick a few dollars our way, it would definitely help out. I do appreciate that. And many thanks to our existing Patreon supporters. We'll be back in 2 days for the Wednesday Forecast Live edition. Hope you have a great Monday night and Tuesday, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.